Gather round, everyone. I'll tell you a story before bed, just like I promised. Now, tonight's tale was a little heavier than usual, maybe even a little scary. It's a tale of greed and violence, regret and sorrow, redemption and revenge. But I think you kids are old enough to hear it, and it's important you do, because tonight's tale is the story of how Big Tom, yours truly, escaped the clutches of a vicious and merciless slave trader and went on to build this community we see here today. You know, I was just a young man when I decided it was time to leave my home in Appleville. I came from a family of blacksmiths, and though I had become quite skilled with a hammer and anvil, I knew it was not the life for me. I wanted more adventure, you know, so I set out to stretch my legs, make a name for myself, find my destiny. Unfortunately, the destiny I found wasn't exactly what I had in mind. No, sir. For just a few short months after I had left home, I found myself within the inescapable grasp of the ruthless slave trader, Nero von Balthazar. Nero found me working as a mercenary along the coast of cities, and experienced naivete leading the way. I was a painfully easy mark for him. So while under the guise of hiring me, I was assaulted and brought into his trade. Though he was not a large or particularly strong man, he was a fearsome fellow indeed. He could get into your head, manipulate you. I was just a lad, and though I was a big fella, much bigger than him, mentally I was as weak as a kitten. He spent months torturing me, wearing me down, and remolding my mind so escape felt impossible. I feared him more than anything I had ever feared in my life. And that fear caused me to go along for years, doing what I had to do to survive, doing a lot of unspeakable things. I felt hopeless, less than human. Eventually, he began to trust me, and knowing I wouldn't run, he cut me in on a swindle. It worked like this. I'd go into a small town or encampment, scout 'em out, make nice, lead a few of 'em off by themselves, and kidnap 'em for Nero. The folks, just wanting to see their loved ones return safely, would pay up. Those who couldn't, well, like I said, Nero was merciless. Now, we could run this hustle successfully a couple of times a month, affording Nero a humble salary, as well as a number of slaves and minions. But after the new devastation hit, well, things changed. In 427, a great, powerful storm ravaged Annam and left it in ruins. Rain and tsunamis, tornadoes and earthquakes, massive forest fires, you name it. The elders say this weren't the first time such a storm had occurred, and that the island must be cursed. But one man's curse is another man's opportunity. With a large portion of the population wiped out, Annam's forces weren't as strong as they once were. Nero practically had free rein to do whatever he wanted. His reputation, power, and most importantly his pockets, grew massively. What was once a humble trade was on track to grow into an empire. But while Nero enjoyed his spoils, I was left wondering what had become of the family I had left behind. What fate had they met in the new devastation? I convinced Nero we should head back east along the coastal cities we hadn't hit in a while. Hope in my heart I'd catch a glimpse of someone, anyone, from my past. But upon arrival, kids, my worst fears were confirmed. As we approached the southern borders, I could see just how bad things had gotten. Appleville was in tatters, needing to be rebuilt almost entirely from scratch. I asked an innkeep if there were any signs of my loved ones. He hung his head and solemnly informed me that my entire family had vanished. There had been no signs of them since the storm had hit, nor the body, nor resurrection. A twinge of regret began to build in my belly. All the years I had wasted, all the awful things I had done, just for a chance to reunite with them. I never got to properly tell them goodbye. Perhaps it was for the best. Perhaps it was better their last memories were of me, happy, not of the monster I had become. There wasn't a minute to mourn before Nero had me back to work. We continued through Appleville and travelled north until we happened upon a shabby outpost in the east. With our encampment set up along the outskirts, I wandered in and began to scout for some targets. The new devastation had too left this place in total disaster. Though the few meagre buildings it had remained standing, the grounds were sogged and marshy. The air was thick and felt dirty in the lungs. Even more odd, it was much colder than I had expected for those summer months. I wondered how anyone was still living here, and how they had even managed to survive the storm on their own. There was nothing really special about the place or the folks living in it. In fact, many of them looked real worn down, real tired. Now, don't get me wrong, there were a few that looked like they might have put up a fight, but nothing I couldn't handle. But as I picked out a few to kidnap, I couldn't help but take notice how kind and trusting the people of Holdfast were. Normally, I'd scoff and take pity on anyone with such a foolish outlook. When you trust so quickly, you deserve what's coming to you. But, perhaps a little fragile from my recent loss, this time, it warmed my heart. I could feel Nero's grip on me begin to loosen, but I didn't want to see him bring his wrath down on these innocent folks. So I got back to work. First, I managed to capture one of the warriors. I knew he'd catch a high price. Next, I captured a rather talkative guy. A book-reading type, you know. A man who babbles like that is easy to get out on his own. Perhaps a bit too willing to learn you something, you know. I knocked him out, and I brought him to camp. Then I captured a cute little halfling lady, a favourite of Nero's. Not only are halflings an easy hunt, them being so tiny and all, but they're considered among many to be the best slaves. I thought when I brought her back, he'd be more than satisfied with today's captures. But I was wrong. Nero had become cocky, more and more power-hungry. He demanded I go back for a fourth. I started to feel that twinge in my gut again. Pushing it down, I obeyed. I set my targets on a young lady. She held a bow, one of those ranger types I gathered, and from what I could tell, no other weapons. At close range, I figured a bow wouldn't be much use to her, and she'd be an easy carry out of the woods. Like the others, I led her down a trail with simple small talk. When I was sure we were out of sight, I bopped her on the head and hoisted her up over my shoulder. Another easy victim. Or so I thought. As I hurried to carry her to camp, we ran into an unexpected problem. A giant snake. Now, I knew I couldn't outrun such a creature on a good day, and especially not with the body on my shoulder. So I dropped her and hightailed it. But, as expected, the critter caught me and swallowed me whole. Now, I know what you kids must be thinking, but truth be told, I was safer in the belly of that snake than I was in the outside world. When the folks found the girl and revived her, she told them everything. And when they saw a snake with a giant lump in its belly, well, suppose you can guess what happened. They don't call me Big Tom for nothing. Cut from the snake, I was beaten and interrogated. It was then I realized how grossly I had underestimated this group. I tell you, some of them had mental mind tricks better than Nero. They forced out of me who I was and what I was doing, all about Nero and his schemes. Once they had the information they needed, I was bludgeoned and left for dead. Yes, it looked like, for the second time in an hour, it was the end for Big Tom. But to my surprise, I woke up. Aching and paining, not sure what had happened, standing over me was the girl, the one with the bow I tried to kidnap. She jerked her head, beckoning me to follow her. She had an arrow nocked, and a look on her face that told me we weren't about to go for a cup of tea. No, sir. However, I didn't have many other options. I was stripped of my weapons, my armor, my money. I had no choice but to do as she asked. As I walked with her, I tried to work my charm, pleading my case, showing her my many scars that Nero had inflicted on me over the years. I promised that if she let me go, I'd free her friends and return them unharmed. Now, these were promises that, deep down, I knew I couldn't keep, and I think she knew that too. Sometimes you gotta say what you've gotta say to keep a silver-tipped arrow out of your back. She walked me to the edge of the trail leaving town and stopped. But behind us, more were following, perhaps curious as to what she was doing with me. It would seem, with the oncoming witnesses, she was hesitant to carry out her plan. She looked at the crowd, then back at me, and with a glare, she said, "Big Tom, I once knew a man like Nero. Come back here with him. or don't come back at all. I promised her I wouldn't, and children, this time I kept my word. Surrounded by bodyguards and the knight I captured with a dagger to his neck, Nero carried out his regular routine in front of the people of Holdfast. Confidently, he paced the crowd, bragging about his riches, taunting what a good master he was. Nero always did have a flair for the dramatic. He gave them their options: pay the ransom he was asking, or say goodbye to their friends. He offered them just 5 minutes to gather the money, and began to count. Normally, I would tune this part of the routine out. It was too awful to listen to. But not this time. I took everything in and was becoming increasingly more sick to my stomach. I felt like a kettle that was about to boil over. 4 minutes. I scanned the crowd and I saw the girl again, the ranger who had let me go. She stood on the outskirts of the group in some tree cover, calm, a smirk on her face, with an arrow ready to fly. Oh no. 3 minutes. I was not the only one to spot her. Nero's guards were ferociously protective of him. They demanded she drop her bow. She refused. Tensions mounted as the final minutes slipped away. I shook my head at her, silently begging her not to do what she was about to do. She just smiled. 1 minute. What happened next is hard to recall. The arrow was loose, and all bets were off. Just like I had, Nero greatly underestimated the power of this group. When I watched them courageously take us on, something within me snapped. My family was dead. So many wasted years fearing Nero. I should have stood up for myself and returned to them. Maybe they'd still be alive. My mind raced. I was incensed. Without thinking, I grabbed a sword from one of the fallen henchmen and attacked, slashing and slashing, releasing the rage of all those wasted years upon Nero. When he realized just how outnumbered he was, and that I had turned on him, he fled. Injured, he ran to the woods until I lost sight of him. And just like that, I was free. The people of Holdfast were still suspicious of my intentions, but agreed to let me stay a while, regain my strength, and get on my feet, as it were, just until I decided what to do with my newfound freedom. But I already knew. I had to kill Nero. Not just kill children. I had to destroy him. His evil was boundless, and I knew after today the hatred in his heart would only grow stronger. I didn't know where to start, but luckily I didn't have to look far, for that very same night Nero returned. Well, that's enough for tonight, kids. It's getting late. I'll tell you the rest of the story another time. Now go on. Bedtime.